figured someone with a little bit of math expertise could help answer some of this. So, with the Dark Brotherhood is coming poisons. And with poisons have come a lot of controversy in terms of how overpowered or effective they are, especially in the realm of PvP. I'm here to clarify some things about them and hopefully quell the rage of the forums. So, to start off, you'll notice on this tooltip how poisons work. Poisons proc 20% of the time on light attacks, heavy attacks, or weapon abilities. This includes AoE abilities such as Steel Tornado, or damage over time effects such as Rending Slashes or Rapid Strikes. This is the same as it is for Stam as it is for casters, both have an equal rate to proc. However, the one thing is it will not proc on ground-based AoE such as Endless Hail or Wall of Elements. As we go back to the poisons, we'll notice that I said something really important, that they only proc 20% of the time, which means they won't have a true value. This is something known as an operational cost. Since it's based on RNG, it can't be up 100% of the time. If you see here, I'll put on my poisons and I'll go hit this mammoth and we'll see how many times it takes to proc. 5 light attacks before it procced, and that was 5 seconds before anything happened. Now remember this, as I'll explain something very important later. The next thing is, in PvP, you have the ability to counter poisons. Since the main thing with poisons in PvP is going to be resource cost increases, the main thing to keep in mind with this is that poisons suffer from a dilution effect, where the more effects you have on them, the shorter they last. So when you have someone stacking ultimate cost increase, stamina cost increase, and magicka cost increase, it's going to go on and off really quickly. Now, someone could only keep stamina, magicka, or ultimate increase, and it's going to last a little bit longer, but it's only going to apply to certain builds. Not all casters are going to care much about stamina increase abilities, and vice versa. The other thing is that they're through short windows of time, and since they have a delayed chance to proc with 20%, that means you have some time in between where you're not going to have this issue. On top of that, this can be purged. I repeat, poisons can be purged. They also do not increase things like block cost or dodge roll increase, as they only increase abilities and ultimates. This is important. That means it's not going to really hurt you defensively as long as you know how to counteract them. Keeping artificial windows of time, and when you know your enemy's poison has been on you, that you know you have a cooldown. So let's say he places 60% cost increase on you and it lasts 5 seconds. That's 5 more seconds, since it's on a 10-second cooldown, where you are free to do whatever you need. So there are ways to counter, and keep in mind, as I said, you can purge them. Moving on, poisons are actually weaker in terms of pure DPS as to the new thing that I'm going to move into a little bit, which are enchants. Enchants got a massive buff this patch, but I'll get to that in a second. The one thing about poisons is they offer great utility. They offer a lot of things that help bridge the gap between builds and add more flavor to the game. Nothing else increases cost. There's also things like minor vulnerability, major and minor breach and fracture, which currently only Templars can apply the minor version of both of these on Power of the Light. So it's going to add some diversity and options for groups that aren't always the same composition or meta-esque. They're also going to fit into endgame PvE rating with minor vulnerability, which is cool as it adds more diversity to the game. However, it's not as big as people think, and here's why. Enchants. Yes, enchants got a massive buff this patch. As you noticed before in live, this used to be only weapon damage. Now it's weapon and spell damage, and it also only used to be as much as a jewelry enchant. Now it is double. Some enchants received 100% of a buff, and some up to 400%. As the damage proccing ones used to only be roughly 900 with 501 CP, and now they're 3000 with only 300 CP. So this will increase even more if I was on my live character, but since NA didn't get their character copies, we won't be able to compare them totally mathematically. Just know that there's a massive boost to these. Now, to explain the enchant procs is there's 100% to proc them on all light and weapon abilities. However, weapon abilities are a little bit more stingy on proccing them. Such things like Steel Tornado and damage over time like Bloodthirst or Rapid Strikes will not proc them. They will only proc on initial application, such as the first hit of Poison Injection, light attacks, heavy attacks, or things like Force Pulse or Puncture. Those will all apply enchants. The same goes for Endless Hail not being able to apply it, or Wall of Elements. So this means that it has a slightly lower chance to proc in combat if you're using an ability like Bloodthirst or like a dot or something like that. It'll have a little bit lower, but the nice thing is that it's guaranteed DPS and it's sustained. They have a shorter ICD than poisons, and they're much more effective. If you actually break down the strongest poison in the game in terms of damage, is this. You take 1503 times 7 divided by 10, and you get about 1050 DPS. Then you take this, you take 3008 divided by 6, you get about 500 DPS. Then you get this, which is 348 weapon and spell damage. You apply, important thing here, things like Fighter's Guild, another 3% weapon damage, 12% from agility. You have 20% from major brutality, and then 5% from minor brutality, and you can get up to 487 weapon and spell damage from this. That's more than 500 DPS from a single enchant, depending on class coefficients and whatever abilities you're using. At max value, this is about 728 DPS from one enchant, and yes, that is including the 1 second it is on cooldown. So right there, we add this enchant with an offhand chant, and we're already beating poisons by almost 50%. Now, these don't offer as much utility as poisons do, but keep in mind that the ever-popular Crusher enchant, which reduced armor, now gives armor and spell resist reduction on mobs, and got massively increased by a little over 100%. So that means more DPS for us, and more damage taken by the enemy. This works in PvE or PvP, so keep in mind, while poisons are kind of scary at first in PvP, enchants are even scarier. Both of them will be affected by Battle Spirit if they deal damage, but they won't be affected by Battle Spirit if in terms of utility. 8% damage is still 8% damage from poisons, but taking armor reduction or spell resist reduction is still the same as it would be in PvE in PvP. So, keep everything I've said in mind here, and go forward with what I've said into live, and realize that poisons aren't that bad. Enchants are the ones to look out for.